Hi, Claudio.
Hi,
So,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine.
So, with me, I have today Claudio. He is originally from Italy, but he speaks a lot of languages, which we'll speak about later. But first, I want to talk to him because I know him from Instagram as phdlinguist, where he shares a lot of interesting things about Harry Potter and the transcreation of Harry Potter. So, Claudio, can you tell us what transcreation is actually?
Okay, so basically, transcreation is a concept that is used in the field of translation studies to describe the process of adapting a message from one language to another while maintaining its intent, the style, the tone, and the context. So sometimes this becomes close to the concept of localization, which is involved like adapting the translated text into a target audience. In short, it is a new term that describing the original word in a different way. Sometimes gives you new features, for example.
Right, because I actually I remember a while ago I'm in this an expat group on Facebook for expats in the Netherlands, and there was this
Hmm.
English guy who was reading Harry Potter to his children, and then, to his disgust, realized that they had translated this certain type of biscuits. I don't remember what they were,
Hmm.
but they had translated it to stroopwafels, which is a Dutch biscuit.
Yeah.
Um, which, and I assume this falls under transcreation, right?
Well, let's say that there are different kinds of strategies when it comes to translate a book. Uh, I would say it's called that part is called probably a localization. It's
Okay.
for example, it's when you try to adapt a term or a concept into a new language. For example, if you read the translation of Harry Potter in Arabic, because of course the majority are Muslims, so when, for example, they are eating in Hogwarts, they don't eat sausages and like
Yeah.
pork, but they change it in something that could be actually eaten in a Muslim country. So I
Oh,
will
right.
call it localization instead of a transcription. Is really when a translator create a new term and gives you
Right.
sometimes a new meaning.
Oh, okay. So it's more for the names of the characters and the
Yeah, normally it could be for names of the character, for objects, mostly to the places sometimes, and yeah, more or less it's like that. The majority is for proper names.
okay, interesting. And so what are some interesting transcreational names that have come up?
Well, okay, I got like several ones depending of let's say the category.
Yeah.
For characters in general, well, one of the one I really like is Dumbledore in Italian because
Hmm.
it's called Albus Silente. Maybe it's because it's my native language, but I find this translation fascinating because its surname reminds the word silenzio, that
Yeah.
it's silent in Italian, which gives another connotation to the character. Because in English, it's described as someone who's always mumbling, and in Italian gives the connotation of someone who's actually very quiet and calm, and it's
Right.
very different from the original version. And also, the same word actually evokes to the word senile in Italian, which is an adjective used for older people. So
Yeah.
it's a very different one.
Oh,
And
that's and
then, yeah, sorry.
so no, Italian is of course, or I assume was the first language that you read Harry Potter in.
Yeah, I actually read the first one in Italian. Then from the second, I started reading in English
Oh,
because I
okay.
was in international school. So then, and I was comparing with people when we were reading together. Then the name was different, and I was thinking, oh, that's interesting how they were so different, and meaning what behind the words are also
Yeah.
different. But then when I started doing my MA thesis, then I was actually starting reading, in Dutch and in French, and then I went to Hindi and Hebrew, and then because I'm doing my work on Instagram, then I started getting to languages I haven't studied for my PhD and my master. So and now I'm actually reading in every kind of language I've been translated. And I found, for example, that Voldemort in Slovenian is called Mlakenstein, which is similar to Frankenstein. And the connotation is very difficult because in English the version is actually coming from French, and they give an allusion to the death because in Slovenian the word mlak means death. So, and when I get into, for example, in Finnish, Severus Snape is called Tartaros, which is a rattlesnake, or in Dutch, Minerva McGonnagall is called Anderling, which
Yeah.
comes from ander, that means other. So it is a lot about the subject's teaching because it is in transfiguration. So sometimes I really find it fascinating and how they get into, when you're in front of a book that you've never been translated before, you have to think, how am I supposed to do it? And sometimes they change the names, and I think it's the most difficult part in the book.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Harry Potter is very interesting because more than maybe other works of fiction or literature, um,
Mm-hmm.
the names really do, like you say, have a lot of association and a lot of meaning to them in terms of
Yeah,
what they sound like and what words they sound like and what kind of character is
yeah,
attributed to someone with that name or of that house or something like
exactly.
that. And
And then
yeah, no,
maybe, when you read it for the first time, I mean, an 11-year-old student, a normal person is reading Harry Potter for the first time, doesn't really get all the story behind the names. But then the more you read it and the more you find it. And when you started reading another language, you realize maybe some origin or the original version. And then, when you got friends from other countries, you start talking about Harry Potter, you don't have the same relationship between the characters because the names are different as well.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, I read it first in Dutch.
Hmm.
And then later, first, I also, because I was too young to watch the movies in English. But as soon as I was old enough to read, my parents said, "We're gonna watch this with subtitles." And I was very
Huh.
opposed to it, but my parents were like, "We no, we cannot do this dubbed movies anymore. Um, let's get to the subtitles." And I found it so interesting because suddenly it was like you had all these new names and all these new
Yeah.
characters, but at the same time, a lot of them also really made sense. Um,
Yes,
but I remember, especially in the beginning, I thought some of them I liked them more in Dutch, obviously because
of
it was
course.
the language that I read them in first. But I was like, but this makes so much more sense, like the things that they that they called them, and I was like, but why? Because and some of them are really well, let's say,
Hmm.
translated in the sense like Slytherin, because Zwaderig,
Yeah,
and it kind of
Patrick, yeah.
yeah, and it has that same like to slither and Zwader has the
Hmm.
same idea to it, so that really made a
Yeah,
lot of sense. Yeah,
yeah.
I thought it was really cool.
And sometimes when I was reading and try to find something behind the words in different languages, sometimes I find why some translator decided to translate it or not, and maybe how they could have been translated. For example, in Spain, the translation in Spanish, in Castellano, for example, has kept all the names in English. And
Yeah,
if you see the translation in Asturian or in Galician or in Catalan, they change them, and it actually
right.
sounds even better in Spanish. So, for example, the remembro it's called recordabola in Catalan and it's called recordadora in Spanish. So it's nice they try to mix like same as in English, like remembro, but sometimes they are so different from the original. I don't really understand why they done this choice. For example, when I like, a few weeks ago I was trying to analyze the objects, for example, and I found, for example, the Danish version. Uh, they changed chocolate frog into a word. It's called platugel in Danish, and it actually means cheesy owl. And I tried to get it. How is it possible? Because then they have a reference in picture when it comes to the film, and you see
Yeah.
there is actually a frog, it's not an owl. So I think it's getting confusing. And in fact, they changed it, the translation in the video games, and they call it something similar to chocolate frog. So
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sometimes I don't really understand why they did it.
I mean, I think what happened, I'm not sure, but I think I read something that when the first books came around and they were so
Ah,
popular, they had to
yeah,
translate it, and they obviously had no idea
about
just
the
how
consequences.
popular,
Yeah,
yeah, and how
Yeah.
some were gonna have like the whole I am Lord Voldemort in
That
the
was probably
second
the
book.
most difficult part to be translated. Yeah.
Right, and if you don't know
Yeah.
that when you're making the first translation, then it suddenly becomes really, and I think in which language was it that they had to make his second name Elvis?
In French, they
Yeah,
call
right?
it. Yeah, I think it was in French. Yeah, they call it Je suis d'or. Yeah, because it says then Je suis Lord Voldemort. Yeah.
Yeah,
They had to
and
actually add it as well, some names to middle names to make it sound like I am Lord Voldemort.
right,
But
right,
I remember when I was reading the Italian version, the first edition for the houses, for example, they made let's say now we could say there's a bad translation, but at that time we didn't know. But
right.
the house of Ravenclaw
Mhm.
in Italian was called Pecora Nera, which means black sheep. And then they had to change it because there is a symbol of the Ravenclaw house is an eagle, and so they had to change it all over. And so the second edition of Harry Potter in Italian has like a prologue where the translator is actually describing why he and she had to make different choices.
Oh,
So
right. So
I think it's very difficult.
has that happened often that they had to like change a translation?
I think it really depends on the century when a book has been translated, and as well for the book itself, how famous it is. Sometimes,
Right.
if you read some book in Russian, they had a sort of um, way of translating, like, okay, let's keep all the names like the original version, then they want to change it because they want to make it similar to a Russian name. And for Harry Potter, if you read the translation of Harry Potter in Portuguese from Portugal and from Brazil, they have done different choices. And so then you started thinking, why? If you want to get a reader of 11 years old to understand everything, or you want to keep it as in the original version, and then afterwards you try to read in English and understand more about it. But I think
Right.
it's a very difficult choice to do at the beginning, especially if you don't know if you're going to be a sequence of the book, and maybe names that sometimes the key of some ritual, for example, in a book. And then so what do you do now? Actually, I'm translating a book for a friend from Spanish to Italian, and there's a there's actually like a key into the name of somebody, and there's a sentence that has been said in Spanish, and I don't know what I'm gonna do now.
Right. Yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
I always,
tricky.
because so I've studied linguistics, but I've
Uh huh.
almost on purpose never studied translation. Not because I'm not interested, but because I know it's a whole field of itself. And when I tell people I study linguistics or languages, they always assume that I study
Mm-hmm.
translation, and I always tell them no, absolutely not, because
Yeah,
it's a
not the same
whole
thing.
it's not the same thing, and it's a whole field
Yeah.
that I like reading about it, but I don't know that much about it at all. And I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
realized, like the whole biscuit debate in the expat group, it made me
Yeah.
realize how like people think that translation is this very matter of fact thing of translating, the house is blue to whatever, and that's it. But
Yeah.
there's so much more behind it, and
Yeah. Especially
there's a lot
because a part of knowing the language, you have to know the culture. And so sometimes you need to decide whether to keep it as the original or change it into the language and the culture of your target language. That's
yeah,
probably the most difficult part because it changes completely the version of the book of whatever
exactly.
it is. Because then if you get, the digital version, people didn't know that maybe they have been done a film about Harry Potter. And then when you start doing the translation, the dubbing version, it's even more difficult. And then if you have to do translation with subtitles, it's even more difficult because, if they say Dumbledore and you see Percamentes in the subtitles in Dutch, then you don't find the correspondence if you don't know the characters.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's so interesting that so many, like, because I was quite disappointed that the Spanish one didn't really
Hmm.
change the names that much. Um,
Yeah, me too.
but yeah, no, it's really it's such a loss as well, because it's so interesting
Yeah,
to see the interpretation of all these different countries of this kind of very, I mean, Harry Potter is like quintessentially English, you know? It's just
Yeah.
so English. Um, and yet it was translated to all these different languages and all these different cultures and countries and
Mm-hmm.
still worked. But it was also given this new, like you said, with the food in Arabic, you know, it was given this new context. And I
Yeah.
think that's almost more interesting than the content of the book itself. Like, how do you translate
Yes.
this super English experience of this wizard boy
Mm-hmm.
going to wizard school um,
Yeah, and
to
I even think that like the fantasy genre is very difficult to translate because the references are not the same. Sometimes they're actually invented, so you need to get the decision of rather make a new one or keeping the original version. And when I was in Brussels doing my BA in translation, we had a class. It was history of translation, and I remember that day when the teacher was asking us, if we read the Bible and in which language, because the story was very different depending on which language you were reading. And he was saying that because they tried to translate it for people everywhere in the world for to get into touch with the Christianism. So basically, there's a part of course, of the Bible when Jesus is in the desert, and the devil is there with him and is trying to try to persuade him. But then, if you read it the same part in Inuktitut in Greenland, then of course they don't have the same references like 1,000 years ago about what is a desert. So basically, in that section, Jesus is in a storm, is a no storm, and instead of camels, they're like seals and penguins. So
right,
and it takes complete division about it. So basically, what you need to do when it comes into translation, you don't have to just read the words, but the whole meaning. So the fact of being into a difficult situation that it could be in the desert, could be the same in a snowstorm. So then that
right, yeah.
it actually changes complete the picture that you have in your head.
No, exactly. And it's so interesting how you then how you're not translating text per se, or you're not translating words, but you're actually translating culture and the references that
Exactly.
the reader is going to understand. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's so interesting. And I also found that because Harry Potter was translated to so many languages,
Yeah.
so I have Harry Potter. I'm a big fan of Harry Potter, for starters.
We are two here.
Yes, obviously. But then beyond just how much I love the story and how much it impacted my childhood, I
Hmm.
also love reading it in different languages because it's actually
Yeah.
surprisingly easy to read if you're
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember people in my high school, and I'll be honest, we all sucked at French. Like, we were all studying French, but we all were really bad. And I remember that my
Hmm.
classmates were reading Harry Potter, and I was like, how can you read Harry Potter when you're so bad at French? Um, but it's because, well, you already know the story, so if you miss a word,
Exactly.
it doesn't matter because you already know what's going to
Exactly.
happen. And
Hmm.
the conversations are surprisingly easy to follow and to kind of fill
Yeah.
in.
I
Although
mean,
I
that's
do,
so true. Sorry.
yeah, no, I do have to say that every single time I start, because I do always start from the first one, just in case
Hmm.
there are any like transcreation, the names, you know, you just want to make sure that you get the
Yes.
story from the beginning. But the first page, the company that Mr. Dursley works at, which was like,
Yeah. It's running. Yeah.
yeah, and I in every single language I have to look it up because I always forget, and it's just a word that never comes up again, and never in my
Yeah.
life have I heard, you know. I keep
Yes.
forgetting it as well. That's the only one, but
Yeah.
then the rest of the story is surprisingly easy, and it's really good for vocabulary. And
Yeah.
I
That's what I wanted to say to you. I mean, when actually I started all of this because I started reading Harry Potter when I was little, and then because I was traveling a lot, then what I was doing is that in every country I was visiting, I was buying a copy of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in their language. And like the last copy I got was last summer. I went to Croatia and I went mad because apparently it's out of stock. They don't publish it anymore in Croatian, but just in English. So I went through like six different second-hand bookshops to find the copy in Croatian. And then
Wow.
actually when I found it out, then you realize then how it's actually easier for you even for learning new languages.
Yeah.
When I was studying Chinese in university, I was reading Harry Potter in Chinese, and it was easy for me, to get, even if it's a literary work anyway. I mean, even for 11 years old, it's difficult, the English version. There are words that maybe don't know,
Yeah.
and then that's why I was, maybe sometimes I would just reading because for fun, just to read the story and try to get as much information as possible. But then I actually was studying, was keeping it up, underlying the characters and find the words. But then it's actually a really good way to learn new languages.
No, and what I found is that, for example, I'm fluent in Spanish, but then I realize that my
Hmm.
Spanish is very much based on real life conversation. So a lot
Yeah.
of times my vocabulary is very limited to whatever you would use in daily
Hmm.
conversation. And
Yeah.
then, so I know the word for laughing, but I don't know the word for
Yeah.
chuckle or giggle or, you know,
Yeah.
all these different
Yeah.
versions of laughing that you don't really use in a daily conversation.
Hmm. Yes.
Those are the things that you then kind of miss. And reading a book like
Hmm.
Harry Potter can really help kind of
Helps a
fill
lot.
in
Yeah.
those gaps.
Yeah.
Um, how many languages do you have the book in?
Well, at the moment, the hard
Yeah.
copy I've got into 56. I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just saying the first book. I mean, the Harry Potter and Philosopher's Stone I got in 56. Then I got the complete version. I mean, from 1 to 7 in Chinese, in Italian, French, and Spanish, and Dutch. Because you know, I like it just to go around and went to secondhand bookshops. Sometime I found the Russian version in Brussels, and I bought all of them, and it was like super cheap. So I say, oh, I'm just gonna have it at home, and then I've got like a list of the ones I still need to have, and it's complicated because there are like languages that are not spoken in Europe and sometimes dialects of India. So I really have to go there.
Yeah.
And that's because I go to also to travel.
Wow. Yeah. And so, which one is your most exotic one?
Okay, I would say I've got a Latin version.
Oh, wow. That's
I've got a Latin version, and probably I've got one in Occitan, which is a language spoken in southern France. It was actually very difficult to get because
right.
I had to get it bought by a friend of mine in France and then sent to me here. It was a bit difficult. And yeah, I mean, Latin version was actually extreme funny to read because, they tried to do it as in ancient Rome. And so a lot of objects did not exist, like a train.
Right.
So, and actually was like, how did it do it? So, for example, when I was reading about the platform 9 3/4, in
Yeah.
Latin it's called like Trepidine Novum Cumplibus Partibus, which is like the base number 9 from which the tribes depart. So they had to try
Oh,
to find a
wow.
way to to describe it. I mean, I know it has been done in 2008, something like that. But then still you have to think about how do we get into that? Like how do you describe like a train or like a pair of glasses?
You know, I can totally
You know,
imagine the writers or the translators thinking, "Oh, this is gonna be fun. Like, we're gonna do it in Latin." And then they start reading
hmm.
and they get to the train part and they're like, "Oh, fuck.
Exactly,
We we made a
exactly.
bad choice." Yeah.
Indeed, indeed, yeah. But sometimes I find it fascinating when a translator is trying to get the same sound of a word that exists in their language, and then mix it with the meaning. Like in French, for one of my favorite translation of the word I've done is the sorting hat, which is called chapeau in French, and it sounds like chapeau, which is hat, but then they
Yeah.
have choix in the middle, which is like a choice. So it's the hat is choosing, and it's like one of the perfect translators I ever found in Harry Potter.
That is
Really, really
better.
like it.
It's better than the English one.
Yeah,
Like, there's no
exactly.
doubt about it. It's better. Like, there's no one could
Yeah,
have. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I think that's the beautiful thing about those translations is that so often
yeah,
they really just go beyond the original version and come up with
Hmm.
things that work even better maybe than the original
Yeah,
one. And that
exactly. I remember that when I was reading the Italian version the first time, the mirror of Erised, which is desire written the other way around.
yeah.
In Italian, they change it into specchio delle emarb, which is the brame. So basically, it's the same mirror which is in the fairy tale of Snow White. And so they make references
Oh.
to another story. So because it's a magical object, then they put it there, and I find, oh wow. And then when I was, reading the original version, I say, oh, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right. So they made like an intertextual
yeah,
reference.
they make a pun to another one. Yeah, I think it's great.
Right.
It's
That's
very
really
great.
interesting. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's well, yeah. God, I was gonna
And then
brag.
when it comes with the all the houses, which is in the original version they got different meaning. Gryffindor, okay, there are different uh, theory about it, if it is coming from French, which is a golden griffin, or it's a door, whatever. And then when it comes to Hufflepuff, which is is a pun to the Three Little Pigs, because for the wolves with the Huff and the Puff. But then
Yeah, yeah.
like some other languages, they just make another different sort of game between them. So, for example, in Hindi, I remember that Slytherin was called Naskati, which is the power of snake, or Ravenclaw in Romanian is Ochi Doshoi, which is the falcon eyes. So they even changed like the bird. Okay, there's a big discussion about Ravenclaw if the symbol is a raven or an eagle. But then,
Right.
like in Italian, they make a game between colors. So because Gryffindor was with color golden, and they changed Slytherin into a green snake, Ravenclaw into a black raven, and Hufflepuff into a red badger. And so they try to get the equilibrium of having the same thing with every character, so called animal and color. And I think it was really, really fun.
That's so, I mean, I wonder how many people were in a room for these meetings where they had to decide, okay, guys, how are we going to do this? And can we
Yeah.
how can we make this work?
Yeah, sometimes it's just one person. And you can
Right,
actually
like that's
see which is the reference book they use to translate. Because, for example, the dialects and languages of Spain, they use the Spanish version to translate into the Tagalog language. And
yeah.
sometimes, for example, the Albanian version, I think they probably use the Italian version as a base because they've done the same thing with colors into Albanian. So I'm wondering,
Oh,
rather they have the same idea, very
right.
unlikely to happen, or they just use a different target. Original, which is a copy of the original again.
Right. That
Yeah.
actually that's quite interesting. I
Hmm.
actually so I was going to brag about my exotic versions of Harry Potter
Which one do you have?
because I have it in five no I because I have it in English, in Dutch, Spanish, and
Hmm.
Portuguese. But
Okay.
then the ones that I'm proud of are, I have one in Catalan because I'm learning it now,
Ah, yeah.
which is really fun because they did do more with the translation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
so
apparently there exists two versions of the Catalan version because it's one
oh
from Valencia and one from Barcelona.
oh
So they
shit.
actually translated into Valencian and into Catalan.
Now I have to get
Maybe I
my
don't know which one you have, but just check it.
shit. Okay, I have to check it now. Um, I think I it was actually quite hard to find, but I ended up ordering it from Amazon when I was in Valencia.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think I have the Catalan, like the yeah Catalan one, but now I'll
Ah,
have to
okay.
find
Yeah.
the Valencian one.
Yeah, but
Um,
sometimes it's very difficult to find copies. Sometimes I really
yeah,
struggle to find I got a Breton version and and a Georgian version. So I had friends going to Georgia to find me a copy, and every
to
time I
find
know
that.
friends that go in some very exotic place. Okay, can you just do a favor? Can you just buy me a version of Harry Potter and
Right,
trust me? So,
right. No, that's
I
well
had a
the
friend doing like a stop in Iceland for like 8 hours. Like, you go run in the bookshop and buy me
find
that,
it.
please.
Find it. Yeah, no, that's actually I've thought about that because I was like I've always wanted to have something to collect because sometimes it gives you like a purpose when you're somewhere, like
Yeah,
I have to find this.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then, there's so many different things, but I was like, I'm not passionate about any of these. But actually, Harry
yeah.
Potter books is a really good one.
I think you
But
should start with that.
yeah, no, I'm
Go for
definitely
it.
gonna start now, and then it's gonna become this hunt for
And
the
because also like the cover are so different from every country. I mean
yeah.
the Breton version, it looks like a magic book. Like it's brown and it's look like really like it's sort of magical. And the picture of the drawing of the Swedish version are beautiful, and the new version in Thai are like really really nice. You should look at that on Instagram.
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that. Um, I also have one in Frisian. Do you have that one?
Oh,
Well,
I don't have any Frisian. You
maybe we
should
can
send me
help
that
each
to me
other
then.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, please do. I haven't analyzed it actually, so it would be interesting for me to do that.
Yeah, no, I really so my mother is Frisian,
How do you
and
get it?
well,
Okay.
I had to order it from a Frisian this online website where they sell like Frisian stuff. Um,
Okay.
it was not easy to get even in the Netherlands, but here
Yeah,
we
that's the
are.
thing. I
Yeah.
need a copy in like Low German. I don't have it, and I don't know how to
Oh,
get it.
I want because so the region where I live in the Netherlands, they
Hmm.
speak Low Saxon. Do you think they have one in that?
Ah, they might have it.
Low Saxon. I'm
Might.
Googling it right now. I actually had a
Check it for
question
me.
because I know
Yeah.
that they've let's say I'm doing air quotes, but you can't see it. But I know they've translated a lot of the names, but is there any version where they've translated the name Harry Potter?
Uh, there is no language at the moment that translated Harry Potter into another name. Not the name, not the surname. They adapted to the language. For example, in Russia, they call it Gary Potter, not Harry Potter. But
Hmm.
I think it's probably one of the names that have not been translated. And of course, it's the main character as well. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and they
no, of
adapted
course.
for the sound. For example, in Chinese, it's Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But I mean, the
Yeah.
sound stayed the same to get it like international.
Yeah.
But
No,
I
but
wonder
that's
now because their new version came in out like few months ago. I think there's a new version in Hawaiian, so
oh,
it's
okay.
in my list now.
Yeah, yeah,
I would be
yeah.
very
Oh,
interested
that's
to. I have to go to Hawaii just to go on holiday there and buy a Harry Potter copy.
yeah, no, obviously. That's the only reason to go. Do you
Exactly.
put that on your visum application? Like what's your reason of your visit?
Probably
Just to
should do
go.
it like for research purposes.
Research purposes. Yeah. That's good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, what I think that's like one of the great things as well about it being translated into all of these smaller languages, like Frisian, for
Yeah.
example, is that a lot of
Yeah.
these languages don't have a lot of books in them, you
Exactly.
know? So
It's
they
prompting the
even
literature in the language is beautiful.
yeah, and and obviously it's very important to have like literature and to have your own um like books for children and stuff, but I think
Yeah, indeed.
um when you have a language like Frisian, a lot of people don't
Hmm.
know how to read it actually because they just never really do it, because there just
Hmm.
isn't enough stuff, and
Yeah.
so translating something like that, which is so universally loved by people,
Yeah.
into these smaller languages gives children an opportunity to actually read a lot of because if you translate all of the books, then you have a lot of reading to do, so it
Yeah.
gives children an opportunity to actually read something in their language, which I think is
Yeah.
so amazing.
That's actually my one of my purposes about collecting Harry Potter. I always said to my friends that I would like people that to come to my place and see all the Harry Potter version and tell me and say, "What's your language? What's your native language?" And so they can come to my place and read Harry Potter in their native language. So every
Oh,
children will come to my place can read it.
that's yeah, no, that's amazing. And do you have the one in Scottish?
Yes, yes. I actually did a study specifically on Scottish when I was in doing my master in English linguistics because exactly the Matthew Spitz, the one who actually translated. is prompting, literature in Scottish language, because people actually don't know that in Scotland they speak English. I mean, the Scottish English, there's Scottish and there's Gaelic
Yeah.
Scottish. So the Scottish is a bit like forgotten, and actually like it. I really enjoy actually reading it. Some names were actually really funny.
I think I saw like a page from the Scottish version uh
Mm-hmm.
on my Facebook feed one day, and I, reading, and it was the page where Hagrid tells Harry that he's a wizard. Um
Yeah,
because that, and it was so funny because that, of course, classically is done by Hagrid with his
his
accent.
accent.
Yeah, and then so
Yeah,
it was so funny to see that. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because because I just started analyzing the first book, but then I actually was thinking about how would they do in the Goblet of Fire with the people coming from other country, from Fleur de la Cour, which is normally she has a French accent, let's say,
Yeah.
in the written form, and I'm wondering what they did in the other versions, if they did it like that or if they changed it. So it's actually really interesting. Every time I read Harry Potter in another language, I found another world basically.
Right. And how do they do that in other versions?
I haven't done it yet. I will tell you in
Okay.
few
You
months.
don't have any like okay, well, we'll have
At the
to.
moment, I mean, what I've done at the moment is just the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So I'm trying to finish it up like very
Yeah.
soon. But I started doing the Chamber of Secrets because I'm trying to do like new characters and then writing objects as well. But I will let you know when it comes to do that.
Okay, cool. That's okay. I feel like I had another question, but now I um so so you have the book in a bunch of different languages, but how many have
Yeah,
you like fully read it in?
read through.
Yeah.
I think if I started counting, the first one was Italian, then in English I read it all.
Mm-hmm.
In French, Dutch, Spanish, Castellano, and I read in Portuguese. Even if I don't speak Portuguese, but I read it.
Yeah, you can.
uh,
Yeah, that's the.
it's a good thing about speaking, Indo-European languages, especially romantic one, because you can actually
Yes.
read it without even know the language. And then I
Yeah.
read it into German and in Chinese. I read it full. And I started. I mean, in Latin because it was easy. But then, I started reading it into Japanese. I don't really have a high level, but was good to read it. Yeah, and the Chinese version I read it into Chinese from China, and the Taiwanese version, which is with traditional characters. So it was just defined, and they actually made different choices when it comes to translating names. So
Right.
it's
So
actually
how does
interesting how
it?
the same language done it.
How so? Because I've read it in a few Indo-European languages, but how does it
Hmm.
work when it's translated to Chinese or Japanese? Like, does it differ a lot from the original text? Do they do a lot of cultural translation or?
Well, for example, I was surprised when I was reading the Chinese version from China,
Mhm.
because there are some lot of references about British culture. Yeah? And sometimes,
Right.
for me, it was fine to read about Halloween, for example, in Italian. So, I mean, even if it's not my culture, let's say I know what Halloween is. And I remember when I was reading that the translator actually put a footnote, and it put that Halloween was, a holiday was celebrated in the United Kingdom, and it was about wherever. So it was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's interesting. Or about Christmas as well, because normally in
Right.
China they don't celebrate Christmas, so they just put it there, and it was
Yeah.
very very different. Yeah,
Oh, that's so.
yeah. And in Chinese, in Japanese, for example, what they've done for the names, they just adapt it as in Chinese for the phonetics of the language. For example, Harry Potter is Harry Potter, and then in Chinese, all the names are like Dumbledore is Dumbledore, but they try to
Oh, right.
to to keep the sound similar to the English version. But then, of course, every character has got a different meaning. So
Yeah.
sometimes they played a bit with that as well and give it like a new meaning. But then it's difficult. We have to find a specific character which has a good meaning and a good pronunciation to be used for a name. I think it
Right.
was they had done like a double job.
Yeah. No, that must. I mean, that must be very difficult. I mean, I
Hmm.
think in most languages, like you know, you're working with all these cultural references, because it's kind of interesting how Harry Potter was the thing that became so universally loved, when at the same
Hmm.
time it is so English. Um,
Yeah,
and you know, I think a lot of people underestimate how much of that had to be translated and like
yeah. All the story
explained.
behind it.
I think like my
Exactly.
as a child growing up with Harry Potter, I think Harry Potter was like my frame of reference for British culture.
Hmm.
Um, but
Okay.
I assumed a lot of it was made up as well. So when I recently discovered, because I have British friends and they
Yeah.
just casually mentioned that they had houses in their schools,
Yeah.
I died. And I was so, and then I called all of my British friends and I said, "How could you not have told me this before?" Because I
Yeah.
thought that this was, I was like, what else did you do? Fly on brooms? Like, did you have potions?
Yeah.
Like, what else are you hiding from me? This is really
But you know, the funny thing is, I got a friend when I was in doing my exchange program in China. A friend of mine, she went to Durham in England,
hmm
and she told me that in the university, what they did the first day, they do like a sorting hat ceremony. They divide it into
really
houses as well, and then they had like a pass to go to the library, and they tell you which house were you in, of course. And then one day the library was closed, and they put it a post saying that it was written like, for example, "Oh, don't worry, guys, we're working on it. The chamber of secret was open. The basilisk is still out."
that
I said,
is
"Come on, this is awesome."
that is so cool. Yes,
And
I
I
wish.
was doing the same thing with my students, because I was working in a secondary school. And so what I did the first day of school, because I was teaching English to them, I actually did the Baltimore test to all of them. I divided into the houses, and I was playing with that the whole lesson. I mean, during the whole year, they were receiving points where they did like homework, for example. They losing points if they were like cheating in an exam, or they did different activities. They were could be object that could be used in the classroom. For example, you can win a golden meet and you can skip a day of homework, for example. And they loved it. And I find it so fascinating how the story is still so close to children, and they're different generation and they still love it. I mean, I
Yeah,
think when I will be 60, I will still talk about Harry Potter, and probably your great grandson will be still talking about Harry Potter as well.
right. Yeah, because I always I think we're roughly kind of the same age. But I recently went, so I feel like we kind of grew up with it. Like for us, we were in the same
Yeah,
age
yeah,
categories.
same age, yeah,
Yeah, so that was like, I always thought that I loved the story because it was kind of related to my age, and I really like literally grew up with
yeah.
Harry Potter.
You
Um,
were waiting the Hogwarts letter like me, did you?
yes, yeah, exactly. And yeah, but at the same time, when I actually went to the Harry Potter, what's it called, exposition last year,
Yeah, yeah,
with my mom, who also loves it, by the way. Like she, you know, she's didn't grow up with it, but she loves it. And then there were so
yeah.
many young children there, and I was like, wow, you
I know, that's awesome.
picked it up later. Yeah, and I think also maybe some of these children are from people that are like a little older than us, or maybe the same age that are. Oh, actually, that's not possible. Or maybe, I don't know. Maybe some of those people grew up with it as well and are like reading it to their children now. Um,
Yeah,
but part of that, because you kind of see them all ages, you know, when you go there, you'll see people that are like 15, people that are like around 10
yeah.
years old, people that
Because
are,
sometimes it happens that you read Harry Potter, you like it so much, and then maybe your parents are getting interested in it, so they read it as well. I mean, my mom read Harry Potter and she loved it.
yeah,
And then my little sister, she's now 11 and she's reading Harry Potter too. Everyone is reading Harry Potter, and it makes like people together. Let's do peace in the world with Harry Potter, basically.
right. Yeah, yeah. It's so universal and so beyond generations as well. Like people just
Yeah,
love it. It's really special.
yeah, indeed.
Okay. So I think this is where we will. I mean, I could talk about it for hours, but I think
Yeah, me too.
uh, we maybe should save ourselves from our love for Harry Potter
Yeah.
and finish this episode. Thank
Okay.
you so much for discussing this
You're
with
very
me.
welcome. Thank you.
And so I think, yeah, no, sorry. This is just me having, okay. I think I'll stop the recording and then we can do a new recording.
Sure.
But yes, so thank you so much for talking to
Thank
me
you.
about this and
It was a
sharing your
pleasure.
knowledge. No, it was my pleasure. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and for inspiring me to start collecting Harry
I will
Potter
send you a picture
memorabilia.
about my library with all my books there.
Yes, please do.
I will.
I'll share it on the Instagram and pages. Like I'd love to.
Okay.
I'll share it. I'll send you a picture of the Frisian version,
Yeah, please do.
and then I'll let you know how I can get one to you if you're interested.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Um. Yeah. So thank you, and I'll
Thank
see you
you.
in a second.